Ghostrunner 2 is a fast-paced, first-person platformer where you die and kill enemies in one hit. The game is intended to test your skills and creativity with all the various tools at your disposal for movement and combat. With a new and simpler skill progression that lets you customize the way you play, the game adds more flavor and flexibility to their already creative experience. So join us here today at Game8 as we review Ghostrunner 2. This is the video adaptation of our review over at our website. Click the link in the description to read the full review. The story of Ghostrunner 2 picks up exactly a year after the death of the Keymaster, the tyrant who ruled Dharma Tower with an iron fist in the first game. It follows the same protagonist, Jack, as you take on a violent AI cult that has infiltrated humanity's last safe haven. However, there are a lot of story bits and pieces that may not be understood by a player who just picked up the game. The game does offer a short recap video that you can watch in the main menu, but it would have been nice if this was played from the get-go. The game does present the characters well, especially the new additions of the Asura. The Asura are the mysterious new Ghostrunner variants who are directly involved with the cultists of the outside world, holding the intention to destroy Dharma Tower. However, Jack, the playable Ghostrunner, and his fellow rebels, dubbed the Climbers, are not really introduced to the player, and newer players will have to piece the information together by themselves using character dialogue. Although the game offers dialogue choices when talking to the characters in the hub zone, they are merely there to expand the lore in the game and are inconsequential. The dialogue doesn't really add much to the story experience either, since they can be ignored most of the time, but this is all probably how it was intended, since the gameplay is the main draw here. The game can be broken down into 3 gameplay segments: the combat segments, parkour segments, and the new motorcycle segments. All 3 have relatively forgiving checkpoints as they tend to be located right before each segment starts, encouraging the player to fully explore each segment to complete them successfully. Combat segments feature multiple stages with various enemies, spread out across the said stages, forcing you to pay attention to their attack patterns and to decide how to deal with them on the fly. The parkour segments are where the game stays true to its platforming roots. Similar to Mirror's Edge, the parkour sections are guided by visual clues and different layers of traversal options, including grappling hooks, vaulting, wall running, wall climbing, and the like. These segments tend to have continuous jumps, grapple points, and vaulting, along with targets to hit to open certain doors, grapple to, or walls to run on. Dividing these gameplay segments into puzzles of sorts makes for a great experience, especially for players who love experimenting with games. The mechanics are simple and relatively straightforward. Pushed by the game's difficulty, things eventually start to click as you continue playing. The game aims to provide you that repetition that will improve your skills and knowledge. Eventually, you will begin to develop a certain style of your own, and the satisfaction of gradually improving is nothing short of rewarding. Ghostrunner 2 follows the same rule as the first game: don't get hit. If you get hit, you'll revert to the most recent checkpoint, which also resets the stage along with every enemy you defeated in the previous run. One of the things you have to understand very quickly is that the game incentivizes good movement, and it's one of the best things that the sequel has to offer. It's fast, fluid, and stylish, allowing you to wall run, grapple, and maneuver around enemies. The feeling of cutting them in half will always be extremely satisfying. Progression has also improved from the first game, as upgrading has been simplified. In the previous game, you had to stack your upgrades, similar to a Tetris-like setup in a fixed grid. This was particularly difficult to understand since you would have to take a lot of time to rotate the pieces around just to make them fit together in the grid you're given. Now, upgrades are bought using in-game currency that can be collected by killing enemies and chaining combos. These are then applied through the motherboard in a comparatively simpler and more straightforward fashion. Upgrades are split into different types and improve various aspects of your gameplay. They'll only need to be stacked in the motherboard in a column to focus on a certain ability, instead of trying to fit everything together. Some of these upgrades improve stamina efficiency, while others improve timing and ease of use of parries and dodges. Some upgrades flat out change the combo counter so that you can chain multiple kills together to maximize rewards. The limit of the grid increases after every mission, as well as the amount of collected chips you've gathered throughout the game. This encourages you to replay stages and look for these upgrade chips so that you can fit more upgrades later down the line. These upgrades drastically change how you play as they expand your options in combat.
It's a
bike.
wow.
Motorcycle combat and traversal are the new additions to the game. Unfortunately, their implementation is done quite poorly, as they are unreasonably challenging to get used to. For example, similar to real life, backing up a motorcycle is a massive pain. This was one area where they didn't have to go for realism. Additionally, the consequences of a minor mishap may involve having to restart an entire segment. This will often lead to having to repeat a stretch of the game multiple times for simply hitting a bump on the road or accidentally going in the wrong direction. Combat during the motorcycle segments is also distinctly different from Ghostrunner's normal gameplay, since the weapons take their sweet time getting primed and functional. This starkly contrasts with the regular, instantly responsive hack-and-slash slice-and-dice combat. While some of these segments are great, especially the ones where you have to speed up to beat the red light, some of these vehicular combat sections feel frustrating to repeat. Aside from the gameplay, Ghostrunner 2's environments look great, and you can see the stark contrast between the cyberpunk theme inside the game's primary setting of Dharma Tower. The place is populated with different enemies with eye-catching outfits and bright neon lights compared to the bleak and barren outside world filled with radiated beings. However, the characters in the game look and feel dry. It feels like you're talking to non-player characters in older Bethesda games like Fallout and Skyrim. There are little to no facial expressions during conversations, and the animations look stiff. These aspects make the characters look dead and boring, even when discussing essential or personal topics. While the game was not particularly made to be a role-playing game where dialogue is necessary, it is something that Ghostrunner can improve on, especially on the human characters. The soundtrack, on the other hand, is similar to Hotline Miami, where its use of synthwave will get your toes tapping while going on a murder spree. Sometimes you will find yourself bopping to the beat as you slice your way through your adversaries. The hype it generates is especially noticeable during boss fights, which obviously calls for much more intense music. The music also becomes like a trance, especially when you get into the zone during combat. This is important because the last thing you would want is to repeat boss segments multiple times to terrible music. That would just be adding insult to injury, really. However, while the music is good, the combat sound effects are a little too weak. The slices you make with your katana isn't as impactful, parries aren't that satisfying, and other stuff like explosions feel a bit lacking. In our opinion, they should have put a little more weight to enhance the experience. Ghostrunner 2 offers smooth combat, fluid movement, and many gameplay modes, and even its own roguelike mode to ensure you're never bored. On top of that, the game is also very challenging, and it will kick your butt multiple times until you learn how to start using the tools at your disposal and figure out how to defeat your enemies. This means the game should net you a pretty good amount of playtime and more bang for your buck. You may often feel frustrated by your constant failures if you're not a fan of trial and error or one-hit death mechanics. But on the other hand, the satisfaction of decimating your foes and successfully clearing rooms full of enemies is unmatched in this hardcore platformer. We're giving Ghostrunner 2 an 8 out of 10. Ghostrunner 2 is definitely a great game for those willing to get good at it. And that's our review of Ghostrunner 2. But what about you? What did you think of the game? Know any other games that can scratch a similar itch? Tell us in the comments below. This is Game8 signing off.